Hi, in this session we will see one of the most important topic from your general studies paper 3. Okay, so that is basically land reforms. Okay, so your economics area. So this topic is otherwise also important from your paper 1 also, because there is a post independence consolidation. So there also you can expect a question from land reform, and you can also expect a question from social issues, which is also there in paper 1. Okay, so this question was in fact asked from paper 3 also and from paper 1 also. Okay, so still we need to cover this area in detail because this is again important from prelims point of view. Okay, so in mains and prelims, very important. So one of the most important topic from economy. Now apart from that, the topics like agricultural subsidies, okay, MSP, PDS, food securities, etc. we will discuss in the coming session. Now apart from all these, the conventional topics in economy like RBI, BOP, WTO, human development, etc. all are very important, and we will do that in time. Okay, so all those things will be covered, but here let's focus on this particular topic, land reforms. So when we discuss about agricultural issues, one of the most important topic that is coming to our mind is basically land reform. Okay, so when you discuss about land reform also, if you need to write an introduction, it is always better to write an introduction which is related to agriculture, because when we discuss about agricultural issues, one of the most important issues, land reform, which I have already told you, so we can always talk about why this particular sector is so important. Okay, so the first paragraph, I'm actually coming to the topic only, I'm not beating around the bush. So we need to talk about this particular sector, why this particular sector is very important. Okay, so why agricultural sector is important for us, that's the question that you need to answer as the introduction. Okay, see, we are very concerned about agriculture. If you see, the contribution of agriculture to the GDP is less than 15%, and we know this is less than 14% also, and on the other side, maximum people, like more than 60% of the population is employed in agricultural sector, and this led to underemployment, disguised unemployment, etc. because see, in a piece of land, let's suppose 5 people can do the work in that land, but still in Indian setup it's like 10 to 15 people are working in that land, and that's what you can see in the situation. See, 15% is the contribution to GDP from agriculture, means 15% of the population only should work in agriculture. Okay, then only this will go hand in hand. But here what is actually happening is 60% is working in agriculture. So if you convert this percentage in terms of numbers, you will understand the situation. So let's suppose 100 is what you are getting, and out of that 15% is what you are getting from agriculture. Okay, and let's suppose 100 people are getting 100. That's the assumption. Okay, 100 people are getting 100 rupees, and 15 rupees is what you got from agriculture, and 60 is working in agriculture. So how much one person is getting? 15 by 60. Okay, on the other hand, rest of the 85% will go to the balance 40. So you can see the difference. Here you can see this is greater than 2 rupees, and here it is less than 25 paisa. Okay, so that's a difference that you can see, and still we are giving a lot of, and that's the reason why we need to give so much importance to agriculture. Okay, now otherwise if you look at agriculture, why this particular sector is important, it is important for many other reasons also. First and the most important reason that we have discussed is 60% or more than the population is employed in agriculture sector. So we need to have a very good agricultural sector so that you can feed these people. That is one thing. Okay, otherwise see, other impacts or importance if you look at from agricultural side is rural urban migration. Okay, see, if you don't have a very good agriculture in rural area, what will happen is the local laborers, they will migrate to urban areas in search of jobs. But what will happen is they are not skilled laborers, so they will not get better employment in urban areas, and they will be exploited, and they will face a lot of problem, and that lead to poverty, deprivation, etc. Okay, so to check rural urban migration, you need to have a vibrant agricultural setup in the rural area. Now this migration otherwise also lead to a lot of socio-economic issues. So if you look at social issues, it will lead to establishment of nuclear family, okay, so it will lead to split in family, it will lead to emergence of domestic violence, it will lead to emergence of new types of crimes, it will lead to emergence of new type of poverty, deprivation, okay. So all this migration is creating problems related to sex ratio also, because mostly the males are migrating. So in the destination area the sex ratio will come down, and in the source area sex ratio will increase. So all these differences you can see, okay. Now apart from that, new types of crimes like pickpocketing etc will also come into existence. So altogether the socio-economic setup will change because of migration. That's the social side. But the point is, rural urban migration you can check if you have a very good agricultural setup in the rural area. Now again, if you look at poverty in India, see, if you look at poverty in India is primarily rural. So if it is rural, means it have to do something with agriculture, or rather it has to do only thing with agriculture, okay. So you need to improve your agricultural setup if you need to alleviate poverty in the rural area. So that is also, from that point of view also, agricultural sector is very important to alleviate poverty, okay. Now if you look at another importance, see, if you need to have a vibrant industrial growth, okay, you need to have a very good agricultural setup, because the raw material for the growth of industries is actually provided by the agricultural setup. So if you need to have a good industrial growth, you need an agriculture setup, okay. So see, you can see when we have discussed about 1813 Charter Act, if you remember, I told you there was a provision of end of monopoly of East India Company in 1813 Charter Act, okay. So with that, a lot of new companies started coming to India, and that led to deindustrialization in India, because Indians had their own setup, and which was man-made traditional setup, okay. Now industries are there in England, finished products started coming to India at cheaper cost, so Indian artisans could not survive, or they were not competent with the finished products which are coming from England. So the life of artisans is completely ruined after 1813 Charter Act, and that led to people shifting to agriculture, okay. So industrial growth was not that good in India because of this. So now here again I'm talking about industrial growth. If you need to have a very good industrial growth, you need to have a very good agricultural setup. For example, if you have a cotton factory, you need cotton. If you have a sugar factory, you need a sugar, okay. So agriculture is very, very important from this side also. And most importantly, among all, it is food security, okay. So if you need to have food security, again you need to have a very good agricultural setup. So all these points we can just write. I just told you why this particular sector is so important. So we are actually going to discuss about land reform only. So these points is something which you can write in your introduction. Now what is the problem with our agricultural setup? You can see every year record food grain production, but even then you have a record food grain production, but still the per capita availability of food is very, very less in India. It can be because of high population also, but the most important reason is actually the productivity is very, very less. So the most important problem which is related to agriculture is actually productivity, okay. See, you can see after green revolution the productivity is improved, but still there are a lot of problem. Again, if you see examples like after green revolution productivity is improved, but that is again for specific crops like wheat and all, right. But even after that, even now, if you look at the rank of India in terms of productivity of wheat, it is 38, okay. So I'm talking about the case which is after green revolution. So if you see rice, the rank is 50. So you can see the productivity is very, very less. Now again, if you see the cases of the pulses, that's the most important area, or that's where we are more concerned about, because the productivity rank is 138, despite the fact that we are the highest producer of pulses. And cotton, animal husbandry, etc., if you look at, we are very, very low rank, okay, in terms of productivity. So the point is, the most important problem that we are facing from agricultural side is productivity. Now, what led to this lower productivity in India? So let's see, there are two reasons for this. So I'll classify this as one as technological factors, okay, one as technological factors and other as institutional factors. So technological factors and institutional factors. Now in technological factors, I am classifying everything which is related to use and availability of technology. So what do you mean by use and availability of technology? Sometimes the technology may be available, but you may not be able to use it, okay. Second, the technology may not be available. So I am talking about both cases. Okay, so the point is, even if the technology is available, the farmer may not be affordable to use it. Okay, he will have a lot of problems, right? Because he don't have the money to invest to buy all this machineries, the fertilizers, etc. Because he is actually going to get money only after cultivation. So once you undertook production, you may get some money, but before that, there is no money for investment. Now there are two choices: you'll get money from banks, okay, or the government spending. So these are the two ways in which the cultivators will get money, banks or government spending, right? Now from banks you will get money from this priority sector lending. Okay, now government spending is what we call as subsidies, and we also call it as public expenditure. Okay, see, public expenditure in India is very, very high, but the problem is most of this public expenditure is going as subsidy. So around 3/4 of the public expenditure is actually going as subsidy, and that's the most important problem, because see, only 25% is actually going as public investment, and what we need is basically investment. Not, see, what is the problem with subsidy? You give subsidy, then you consume it and end of it. That's a problem, right? You give water subsidy, you consume it, end of it. Fertilizer subsidy, consume it, end of it. Electricity subsidy, again the same thing. So what we need is not subsidy, we need actual investment. But here the government spending is actually for the government spending should be there, but maximum should be given for investment and minimum should be subsidy. Okay, so then it will be good. But here in our case, 3/4 of the government spending is given as subsidy and hardly 25% is going as investment. Now then, what are the institutional factors? Institutional factors means the relation between producer and the resource. So if you look at agriculture setup, what is the resource? Resource is land. Producer means the actual cultivator. So this relation is what we are looking at. Okay, so whether the actual cultivator is the owner of the land, that's a point that we need to discuss. Because see, if you are the owner of the land, you don't want to afraid of anyone and you can do any investment. But in the case of India, mostly we have seen, especially in the previous lecture when we discussed about land revenue settlements, most of the time the actual owner is not the actual cultivator. So that's the setup in India, right? So the zamindar may be the owner, but the cultivator may be the sharecropper or the subtenant or occupancy tenants. Okay, he may have some occupancy rights, but he don't have the complete rights over the land. Okay, so the point is, when you don't own the land, you may not feel like investing in the land, because you don't know at what time you will be evicted by the actual owner of the land. Okay, so see, you can take your own example. If you have your own business and if you're working for some others, if it is your own business, you will go to the office very early and you will come back very late. Okay, and you will work maximum possible. But if you're working for someone, you may not go before the time and you will come in the sharp time also. Okay, so that's what you can, and you can compare the same situation here. You are working on some other's land, so what is the point in doing all this hard work, or what is the point in doing all this investment? Because eventually at some point of time you may lose this land, right? So that's the idea. So people are not motivated to work, and that's what the institutional factor. And to solve this problem, so one of the most important problem of agricultural sector is productivity, and two reasons: technological and institutional. To solve the institutional factor, we introduce land reform. Okay, so the technological, we can pump in investment, we can give money, we can make use of technology, we can give or we can create situation where the technology is available. All these things can be done. But the other side, institutional factor, you want to give ownership to the actual cultivator. That's the context of land reform. Okay, so we are actually moving on to the topic now. So land reforms. Now before we start this discussion, you need to have a clear idea about the land revenue settlements like Zamindari settlement, Riotwari settlement and Mahalwari settlement, which I have discussed in our previous video. So you have to see that video before we discuss this video. Okay, so let me start off with the first land reform, that was abolition of zamindars, abolition of intermediaries. Okay, intermediaries means I am talking about zamindars, taluqdars, jagirdars, etc. They are known in different names in different areas. Okay, so what happened? See, the tax was paid to the zamindar, the subtenants or the occupancy tenants, and the zamindar will pay to the state. Now there is abolition of zamindar. So this reform actually benefited a subsection of tenants or the occupancy tenants. These people have some occupancy right over the land, so they came up they came in contact with the state directly now when there is no intermediaries. Okay, so abolition of intermediaries, that led to benefit some sections of the peasant, what we call as occupancy tenants. Okay, occupancy tenants means those people who have some occupancy rights over the land. Okay, so keep in mind, they are different to sharecropper or subtenant. So sharecropper, they don't have any occupancy rights. Okay, they will give a part of the produce to the owner of the land. Here they have certain rights. Now they came into contact with the state directly. There is no intermediary. So this benefited a subsection of the tenants only, not all the tenants. Okay, so occupancy tenants got the benefit. So what do you mean by occupancy tenant? This point need to be very clear, because in future we are going to discuss about subtenants or sharecroppers. This means they own some land. Okay, so they own some land, they have occupancy rights, okay, own or occupancy rights over some land, and they are cultivating, and thus they are cultivating in his own land. Okay, so someone is cultivating on his land. Okay, so that those people got the benefit. They used to pay tax to zamindars, so now that post is not there. Okay, so abolition of intermediaries. And the most important point here that you need to notice, the sharecroppers or subtenants, they didn't got any benefit out of it. Okay, so you can see now occupancy tenants got the complete right, and you can see occupancy tenants started exploiting the subtenants or sharecroppers later. So the things that zamindars did to occupancy tenant, now the occupancy tenants started doing this to the sharecroppers or the subtenants. They started charging more share from the produce, etc. Okay, so the sharecropper may cultivate in their land, so when they do that, sharecroppers have to pay huge amount as tax or share to the occupancy tenants. So whatever zamindars did to occupancy tenants, now occupancy tenants, once they got the rights, they started doing it to the sharecropper or the subtenant. And for them, you can see next reform. We'll come to that. Okay, so let's quickly discuss about the important other aspects of abolition of intermediaries. And you can see this was one of the land reform which was very successful. Okay, because other land reforms are not that successful. Here the reason is political will is very important. Okay, so here the thing is, you are abolishing the intermediaries, that means zamindars, and zamindars were considered as enemies of all sections, so it was very easy to implement this law. Okay, but the point that you need to remember is, here the abolition of zamindars, the zamindars were compensated. Okay, so zamindars were compensated. So you have taken away the ownership of zamindars, but you have compensated, unlike in Soviet Union. So you can see in Soviet Union, the same land reform, the land is simply taken away, there was no compensation or anything. Okay, here it was also very easy, because zamindars, moneylenders were considered as enemies. Okay, so it was very easy to implement this, and they are compensated also. And that's the reason why this was successful. Okay, now you can see around 25 to 30 million occupancy tenants got the benefit out of it. 25 to 30 million occupancy tenants got the benefit out of it. So abolition of zamindar was the first step towards the land reform, but not all the problems solved. I told you, only occupancy tenants got the benefit. Now the other sections like sharecroppers and subtenants, we have to do something for them, right? So that's why you can see later tenancy reform. And we need to see 3 points under tenancy reform. The first is, see, I told you already, abolition of zamindars, occupancy tenants got the benefit. Now, under tenancy reform, the first point is again for occupancy tenants, that they are conferred ownership rights. So those occupancy tenants who got the rights over the land, now they are conferred ownership rights. Okay, so conferred ownership rights to occupancy tenants. Okay, so conferred ownership rights to occupancy tenants. Okay, so now they got the complete ownership of the land. But the most important part of this tenancy reform is the next two. Okay, so next one is related to subtenants or the sharecroppers. So I have already told you, these occupancy tenants who got the rights, they started exploiting the subtenants and sharecroppers as what zamindars did to occupancy tenants, right? So this second provision, you can see there should be a security of tenure for subtenants. Okay, so you got the ownership right, but you should give a security of tenure. Okay, so it should be fixed. So subtenants and sharecroppers, now they got the security of tenure, so before that nobody is going to evict them, so they can undertake cultivation, they can invest also. Third is regulation of rent. That means you cannot charge as much as you want, or you cannot charge in your wish. Okay, so there is a regulation of rent. So these are the 3 points, and out of that 3 points, these two are important because these two are related to the subtenants or sharecropper. Okay, so 3 points: conferred ownership rights to the occupancy tenants who got the advantage in the previous land reform. Second, security of tenure for sharecroppers to the subtenant, regulation of rent. Now, the point that you need to know here is, this was not implemented properly, unlike the first one. First one, I told you, it was one of the most successful earlier land reform, and I told you the reasons also. They were compensated and the political will was also there. Here, it was not implemented properly, and if you look at it, around 11 million subtenants got the benefit. 11 million. There I told you 25 to 30 million. So 25 to 30 million. Now, Even if I am saying 25 to 30 million and 11 million, don't think that at least half got the benefit. No. The reason is, if you see subtenants, they are much more than the occupancy tenants. Okay. So compared to this 11 million is very small, because here the number is very large and the base is large. Here the number is small and base is small. Okay. Now if you understand in terms of area, you can see it was successful in 4% of the operated area. Okay. So that itself will tell you this was a failure. So implementation was not that good, and most of this 4% is lying around 7 states. Okay, so 7 states performed very well. Out of this, Kerala and West Bengal did very well, because I told you already political will is very important, because land is a state subject. Okay, so Kerala and West Bengal had communist government which is pro-farmer. Okay, so it was implemented properly in Kerala and West Bengal. Now other states, if you look at the other 5 states, I told you 7 states comprise of this 4%. One is Maharashtra, okay, then Gujarat, then Himachal Pradesh, then you can have Assam, okay, then Karnataka. So these are the 7 states which implemented land reforms, the second land reform, that is tenancy reform, properly. It was failure in all other states. And the failure, if you look at, the failure was there in the primary stage itself. Primary stage means, first you have to identify the sharecropper or the subtenant, then only you can give the benefit. The identification of sharecropper itself is a problem, because nobody is going to a village office and they are not aware of things, right? They are not going to register. And the Zamindar or the occupancy tenant, they are not going to allow also them to go and register. So identification of sharecropper was the most important problem. Okay, so identification of sharecropper or the subtenant was the most important problem, because of due to the failure. Okay, so due to that, this was a failure. Why it was a failure? Identification of sharecropper. The primary stage itself was a failure. And you can see in 1977 in West Bengal, they started an initiative called Operation Burga. Burga literally means sharecropper. So under Operation Burga, it was actually a tenancy reform. The village officials, they started going to rural area and they started identifying the sharecropper, and they are forcefully asking them to come and register in village office, so that you will be able to extend the benefit to the sharecropper. And that's the idea of Operation Burga, and that's the reason why I told you it was very successful in West Bengal. Okay, so I told you the problem was with identification of sharecropper, and I told you political will is important. So here you can see that the officials went to the village and they started identifying under this operation called as Operation Burga. Now the third land reform is ceiling on land holding, okay, or land ceiling acts. Okay, so ceiling on land holding, that means no landlord is allowed to hold more than a particular amount of land. So if you have excess amount of land, that will be taken away and will be redistributed to the landless. So if you observe land reform, okay, the objective is basically to promote productivity on one side, at the same time as a social justice, to give land to the landless. Okay, so the idea of this is basically to ensure equality, or as part of social justice, to give the land to the landless. But this was also not that successful because of many reasons. Because see, if you have excess amount of land, okay, so if you have this much amount of land and you are allowed to hold this much, okay, or let's suppose you have 10 acres of land and you are allowed to hold 5 acres. Let's consider this example. And out of this 10 acre, 5 acre is very good land, fertile land, and the rest of the 5 acre were infertile land or bad land. So which one you will surrender? When you surrender, you will surrender the inferior land. And when you are giving this inferior land to the poor people, the landless people, they don't have money to invest on that to undertake cultivation. So there is actually no use for getting this land. Okay, that was one of the problem. The problem was related to productivity problem, or most of the time inferior land is surrendered. Okay, that is one of the most important problem. Second, you can see a person can have this much amount of land that is fixed. Okay, so what will happen is, you can see a lot of fraud transaction. You will transfer that land into particular different other people. Okay, earlier a family can have this much amount of land. So if it was a joint family in the beginning, family will split into nuclear family and hold different amount of land. Okay, so let's suppose 10 acre of land is there. So you will divide like 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre. You can have 10 nuclear family, like that you will divide, and you will not allow the state to take away the land. Then when a person can have this much amount of land, means you are writing the land in terms of different other people, a lot of binami transaction. You are in fact writing the lands in the name of the pets also, like cats, dogs, etc. Okay, so there were a lot of fraud transaction with the nexus with village officials. Okay, you can see huge big landlords and village official nexus, so they were not giving land to the landless. Okay, so the fraud transaction was the second problem related to this. Okay, then you can see family split, because joint family is splitting to nuclear family so that they don't want to lose the land. So when you look at social issues later, we will come across this situation. In India, nuclear families emerged not because of industrialization or not because of other opportunities. It is basically because of land reform. Land reform is the actual reason behind the emergence of nuclear family in India. Unless in Europe, industrialization led to emergence of nuclear family because you are migrating in search of better job and all. But in Indian context, the actual reason for emergence of nuclear family is the land reform. When ceiling on land holding was there, a family cannot hold this much amount of land, means you have to divide your family to keep the land with you. Okay, so I hope this point is clear. So that's the reason why this was not successful, because a lot of fraud transaction, family split, most of the time inferior land is surrendered. In 1972, you can see sender come up with an advisory. Okay, so it has to be implemented by the state, and different state implemented in different way, because the land availability in different state is different, the population is different. So when you divide, you will get different amount of land that you can hold in different state. Okay, so it depends on state. The advisory, the center come up with an advisory in 1972, and they divided the land into three category: best land, okay, second best land, and the third category. Okay, so best land is what we call as the most fertile land, and the prescribed ceiling was 10 acre. Okay, see, remember, again it varies, depends on the state based on the availability of land over there. Now second best land, it can be 18 to 27, and third category, that is the least fertile or infertile land, that is 27 to 54. So the idea is most fertile land, less ceiling, and least fertile, more ceiling. Now one more important point that I need to discuss during this time is, see, this was implemented compulsorily by the state, and parallelly there was a movement which is going on, which is based on the same idea, and that's what we call as Bhudan movement. Okay, so Bhudan movement, which was initiated by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. The idea is the same. So if you have surplus amount of land, you surrender the land, pool the land, and give it to the landless people. Okay, so on one side, anyway state is going to take away your land. Before that, you pool your land and you give it to the landless people. That's the idea. So if you ask me what is the difference between Bhudan movement and Land Ceiling Act, land ceiling was compulsory and Bhudan was voluntary. Okay, so both were not successful. And if you look at Bhudan movement, the objective was, or the target was to redistribute around 20 million hectares, but they were able to do around 1 million hectares only. So it was also a failure. Both were failure, but the point is, two movements which are going on with the same idea parallelly, one voluntary and one compulsory, non-voluntary. Now if you look at state-wise implementation, 3 states were successful in this: Jammu Kashmir, West Bengal, and Assam. These 3 states were successful in implementing land ceiling laws. Now other land reforms I will briefly mention, because these 3 are the most important land reforms. Abolition of intermediaries. Okay, from that occupancy tenants got the benefit. Tenancy reform. In that 3 provisions, occupancy tenants got the ownership right, conferred ownership right, security of tenure for the subtenants or the sharecropper, and regulation of rent also. Third one, ceiling on land holding. Next is consolidation of land holding. Consolidation of land holding. See, the idea is, I told you in the beginning, to improve the productivity. Okay, so the idea is, if you have a different amount of land in different areas, okay, so 1 acre in one city, 2 acre in other city, 3 acre in other city, you surrender this 6 acres to the land, okay, or 4 acre in other cities. So totally you have 10 acres, but it is spreading around 4 cities. You can give these pieces of land to the government. Government will give you a compact consolidated land, and once you get 10 acre like this consolidated land, the idea is the irrigation facility you can improve, right? Because you don't want to spend too much fencing and labors, and everywhere you will get the advantage. Okay, that's the idea. So that's what consolidation of land holding. You give your scattered pieces of land to the government. Government will give you a consolidated plot. But the problem again was, see, the emotional attachment which is associated with the land. Okay, see, I might have got this piece of land from my grandfather, so I don't want to give this land because I lose the ownership. I get somewhere I may get good land some other places, but the emotional attachment was the problem. And second problem is related to the productivity or the fertility, right? See, in this area, whatever land you're holding, although it is scattered, you may have a most fertile land, but you are very uncertain about the land that you're going to get. This 10 acre that you're going to get may be inferior land. So you don't know about which land that you're going to get. When you have a productive land, what is the point in surrendering that? Okay, even if it is scattered, no problem. I'm okay with that. Okay, so these are the two problems that is associated with this particular reform: productivity related problem and the emotional attachment related problem. And it was a voluntary reform, but two states made it compulsory: Punjab and Haryana. Okay, and that's the reason why if you look at Green Revolution was very successful in Punjab and Haryana, because Green Revolution need everything in large scale, whether the seeds or the fertilizer or the irrigation, everything in large scale, and you need large amount of land also. So when you have done this forcefully or compulsorily, now people who have land, they have a consolidated huge amount of land. So you can implement Green Revolution and its ideas very successfully, so you can use the concept of economies of scale in a much better way. And that's why Green Revolution was very successful in Punjab and Haryana, because they made consolidation of land holding compulsory. Okay, so again, if you look at some other states which were done well, UP, Bihar, but still it was voluntary only. UP, Bihar and some other states like Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir and Karnataka. So these states also did well in this side. Okay, but this difference is the problem: fertile, infertile difference is there, and emotional attachment. These are the two problems associated with this. So once you understood that emotional attachment is the problem, that you are losing your ownership, then the next reform which was introduced is to solve this problem. That is what we call as cooperative farming. Okay, cooperative farming. It's like you have a certain amount of land, okay, but we need to use the concept of economies of scale. So 3-4 people have scattered amount of land. What you'll do is you'll pool your land together like this. Okay, now you are pooling your land. That means this land is in your name only. You are not losing the ownership. So emotional attachment problem is solved. Okay, now you can use the concept of economies of scale. You can invest everything in large scale based on the proportion of land holding. Let's suppose this person is having 10% land out of the total. This person is 30 and this person is having 60%. So the investment will be done in the same way and the profit is also taken in the same way. So that problem is solved. Emotional attachment problem is solved. Okay, but still there will be a problem related to the productivity, infertile land and fertile land. This 10% only, but this person is having the most fertile land. Okay, now his investment, this person is having infertile land. Now this person, if he is cultivating alone, he may need to invest something, but when they are cultivating together, he need to invest more, because to take care of this infertile land he need to invest. But when you get the profit, this person will get more profit. That involves impact of his land also. So the problem here was again related to fertile, infertile land. I hope this point is very clear. Okay, but this was implemented voluntarily only in India, but in China it was compulsory. Cooperative farming was compulsory in China. And now if you look at the implementation of this, 0.2 to 0.3% of the populated area. It was the worst in terms of all land reforms. Okay, it was a big failure. So if you need more idea about this discussion, I've taken this from 11th class NCERT only, older one. Okay, so from chapter 7, page number 65 to 72. You can look at this. So the new one, Indian economic development, that the details which is given is very less. So take the old one and you can have a reference in this page numbers. So you'll get much more idea. Read it once. Even if you're not referring to that, it's fine, perfectly fine. So these are the things that we need to look at. Okay, so what all things we have covered? I have covered 5 important land reforms. Now again, this is pre-1991. Post 1991, after liberalization, globalization, privatization, after LPG, I have to discuss other reforms. I'll discuss that in the next video. Okay, so pre 1991, first one is abolition of intermediaries. Okay, that means occupancy tenants got the benefit. Okay, we have seen 25 to 30 million occupancy tenants got the benefit. Okay, so second one was tenancy reform. Okay, and we have seen the 3 provisions. Occupancy tenants got the ownership rights, conferred ownership rights to occupancy tenants, then security of tenure for the subtenants or the sharecroppers, and regulation of rent. Okay, then third one was ceiling on land holding. And we have seen the issues related to that. Lot of road transaction, village official, the landlord nexus. Okay, then inferior land is surrendered, family split. Then we have seen consolidation of land holding. Okay, the problem was emotional attachment with the land. Okay, and the inferior land, and uncertainty related to which land you are going to get. Okay, so that was the problem. Consolidation of land means your scattered lands, you can give it to the government will give you a compact plot. Okay, then finally we have seen cooperative farming. Number of farmers pool their land together and they will undertake cultivation by spending amount or invest amount as per the ratio of the land holding, and the profit will be shared in the ratio. Here also the problem is related to fertile infertile land difference. Okay, so I hope all these 5 are clear for you. In between we have discussed about Bhudan movement, which was a voluntary movement, okay, by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. So I hope you understood everything of land reform. Post LPG land reform we'll discuss in the next video.